Welcome back to part two of my interview with Marilyn Letchworth here at Fair Folk at Work. On part one, we talked about Marilyn teaching commedia. Now we'll talk about Marilyn doing commedia and other acting projects. There's a tape of you doing a commedia, and you go out into the audience and you're looking for Arlecchino or somebody, and you're just going up to various members of the audience and saying, his teeth are too long, his hair is too short. Or you're basically just wandering through making impromptu comments about everybody in the audience, making them all laugh. To me, as a performer, those were always my favorite parts of the show. Was it the same for you?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, well, what I did, and this is a tool that I used at Dickens Fair in the streets, was I knew every audience member was a friend of mine. I called them Isabella or Leandro. They were Isabella or Leandro. So people were arriving. Jim and I were out in the when we did up beyond Broadway. People would arrive and we'd say, Isabella, Leandro, it's so good to see you. And we do a whole thing. And I taught a class once for Dickens Fair. And I tried to teach them that method because you can't do anything wrong. You know these people, so you can talk to them and it's okay. And you're not, and they love it. And you don't have to have something really special. Although I did do gossip several times with people and they like that. But it just really is a tool. It's really helpful to know everybody and know their names. You make up their names. And if they say, no, my name isn't Leandro. Oh, I understand you're traveling incognito. We won't tell anybody. Shh, we won't tell anybody. So you can always do something with that too. And yeah,
With
that's
Mark and myself, everybody was Uncle Bob and Aunt Mary. So
perfect.
it was the same thing that Uncle Bob, Aunt Mary, you're finally here, and then the big hug, and then did you find a place to park?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's good. I mean, you don't want to give a different name to everybody because that's going to
right,
fly.
that's hard.
Yes, you are. But it doesn't matter if you call everybody by the same name because
And then it's funny when other people who've heard the first Uncle Bob come through, and they realize that everybody is Uncle Bob. And so then they get in on the joke too, and they start saying, Uncle Bob, how's it going, or whatever.
yeah, it's so much fun. And Jim and I did this show where we would bring audience members up onto the stage to play the characters. Before we started the show, Jim is giving me the bad news that all the actors are back in the bar getting drunk and they're not going to do the show. So what are we going to do? What are we going to We have no actors. Well, Isabella and Leandro. And I'd go down to the audience and grab Isabella and Leandro. They knew who they were, and they'd come up, and it was great. I only once had someone refuse, and that was a teacher from my kids' elementary school. And that minute, we knew he was a jerk. And he was. He was a jerk.
We
But
did it sort of the same idea, a little bit opposite. We would have pull up a volunteer, and I was the narrator, and so every volunteer we ever used is named Bob because I can't remember name short term, and it's kind of a funny joke that let's just call you Bob. It's just easier that way.
we don't go there trying to learn their real name. They're just Isabella and Leandro. And at Dickens Fair one year, I was playing the maid in Fezziwigs, and I had Chris Zeta was the cook. And we took a break and we went up. This was at the theater in Oakland, and it had levels. We went up to Don Brown's tea house, and we had cups of tea, and we gossiped very loudly. And then we went, oh, wait a minute. There's Mr. and Mrs. So and so, and don't tell anybody in Fezziwigs what we said. Don't tell anybody. See, and we could see Fezziwigs from up there. And then later, I said, don't spread the gossip. Don't spread the gossip. Later on, they were down there telling people what the big secret that we had gossiped with. And that I loved. I just adored that. So great. Because we were having fun just doing a gossip bit. And but the fact that they went down to Fezziwig, because we had told them not to breathe a word about the fact that the eldest Fezziwig daughter was had a crush on so and so, or something like that. Don't breathe a word to anybody, especially if you go to Fezziwig's. If you're in Fezziwig, do not say a word about this. And of course, they would go right down there and start a gossip chain going with the Fezziwig actor. So that was a lot of fun.
And I'm sure whoever those people were, they remember that and they remember you to this very day as perhaps one of the highlights. And it's why they come back to fair because they've had that experience. What Phyllis set up in this environmental theater concept was that everybody was there to play and that she set it up that nobody could fail. I mean, nobody is brought on stage and made to look like an idiot. It's well, I think in your commedia workshops, you get to that as well. Everybody's going to have fun. There's nothing, there's no way you're going to fail at walking like a duck, right?
Yeah, no way to fail. I mean, you walk like a duck the way you would walk like a duck, and that's fine as long as you seem like a duck. And there's many ways to walk like a duck.
Put a little duck ears on somebody and tell them to quack like a duck. They do it and it's popular and everybody laughs and everybody gives them a smile and a pat on the back.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're walking around like this is a great place to play.
Well, it's definitely interactive, immersive theater when you're handling it that when you're performing that way. The whole fair, like Phyllis used to say, all the fair is a stage, and everybody, they're all actors. The people that come to visit, they're all actors. You've frozen, I think. No,
Nope,
you're
I'm fine. I was just holding still.
scared when anything stops moving.
We are getting in that stage in life, I suppose, when that is of concern.
Yes. Yeah, that's the problem with my. Uh, I figured it was a good thing, a good time to retire from teaching commedia because I couldn't stand in front of the class and say, and so you could do, what is it? I remember what I was going to say. In front, the kids wouldn't even notice probably, but I would, and it would really upset me. But yeah, I'm 75, and I, things start happening, things start changing. So I can play the old man.
With an added degree of authority. Let's do a counterfactual. If you had never done fair, how do you think your life would have been different? Or if you had never seen Commedia, how would have your life evolved?
Well, I would still be an actor. I would still be acting. Uh, but I was always drawn to the whole commedia thing. I don't know why I can't even remember. It just felt like me, so I kind of went in that direction. But if I'd never had a chance to work with Theater of Marvels or work with the kids from down south and stuff like that, I would still be acting. I'd still be doing comedy because I was always cast as the old lady or the servant or the little girl or whatever. So I never was going to be cast as an ingenue, never. And I didn't want to be. I think I would still be acting, but I sure would have missed out on a lot of fun because it really is fun for me. And it taught me a lot. Every performance taught me something. Once I fell through the stage, the stage gave way. Unfortunately, and I didn't know it, I was pregnant at the time. I'm glad I didn't know it, but things are going to happen to you and you just react to them and then you remember, oh, that's how I reacted. That was a good idea, something like that. But I'm also very much into art and music. So I would be doing my art. I'm doing a lot of my art now. And I would be practicing my music. And if my mother had allowed me to take up the violin when I wanted to, I would have been playing the violin all these years.
What is your art?
I used to draw and paint when I was in high school. I didn't want to have anything to do with structuring things because it scared me or something. I didn't think I could do it. So I just did painting and drawing, and that was really fun. But when I turned 50, I was also a writer. I also wrote a lot of poetry and stories and stuff. But that year, I started making stained glass windows. I started playing the fiddle. I started making jewelry. And my main thing is I make beaded headdresses, really fancy headdresses. Each one has a story. It tells me the story as I make it. I write down the story and I make a little booklet, attach it to the crown. So every piece has a story to it. And people, that's kind of a different thing. People really like that. So I'm getting back into my writing apparently because people have complimented me on my writing. I'm sort of coming around again, never goes away. Yep. It,
I know that a question I could ask, and I would know what your answer would be. So I'm going to ask a different kind of question. Instead of what is your favorite role, I would say, what role would you most like to play that you haven't played?
I used to say Lady Macbeth, but no, that's okay. I don't need to do that. A role that I haven't played that I'd like to play. Well, it would have to be comedy and maybe something from maybe Lady Bountiful or something like that. But I can't even because I'm playing what I want to play. I just can't even think what
What would go into the role that you haven't explored yet that you would like to?
go into the role of Columbina or another character.
Another character, and say you have to play somebody not Columbina.
Yeah.
Who is that?
See, now my brain is turned off. I mean, I've read so many plays and seen so many plays. Um, oh, I would like to play. I did a scene once from a Noel Coward play. I loved the character that I was playing, and it was with Jim. And he said, he just threw me over in his arms and he was going, let's run away. Come run away with me. Like, okay. Like that. And when I saw Cal Shakespeare Festival, I saw that play being done there. And when he asked her to run away with him, she went, yes, like that, which, everybody thought was funny. But when I just went, yes, the kids, the people, the students watching just got hysterical because it was just what you don't expect. And it just came at the moment. It was just, I hadn't rehearsed it that way. I just happened and I loved that. I will never forget it. Um, so I'd like to play that character so I could get that right in a professional theater and do that scene.
Instead of going big, you went small, kind of thing.
Yeah, I had been because we'd been big all through the whole scene, and Jim had me like this. I'm like this. I'm looking up at him, and he's run away. Let's run away. And I just went. It was so overpowering. I just went yes. It just like this squeak, and because it was so overpowering to me. So yeah, I love Noel Coward stuff. I'd like to play any of those characters. And also, I've played some Shaw characters when I was in shorter players, when it was just transitioning into youth theater. Um, and that was fun. So,
Eh,
so
I'm getting let me make a suggestion, but I'm thinking of you sort of underplaying a Margaret Dumas character in the Marx Brothers.
yes, yes. Oh, give me that drink, please. Right now. I want that drink. Yeah, yeah. That would be fun. And also, I had my days when I was in college at Cal reading Shakespeare. I had they just had us work with books. That's all we did. We read. So when I'd be studying a Shakespeare play, I would read it out loud and I would do the full drama. You know, the queen, and terrible things happening, and oh my children. I loved it. I got way over dramatic with that stuff, but I loved doing it. It was like letting something out. I it would have been terrible if I had played it the way I read those, but it was so fun. It was fun to do that. When I was in high school, I did play a serious role. But something really funny happened during the play that
Which was?
okay. So it was Rashomon, and I was playing the mother, the old mother of the ingenue, the star of the show of the play. And we had these built-on stages to the main stage, and the one on the left was they turn off the lights, and I get there on that stage, and my daughter would come and put her head in my lap, and then she would say, "I don't know what happened," and the lights would come up. That was the cue for the lights to come up. It was a very serious scene, and we were crying. And well, one night in the dark, this is Elaine Corral. She was a newscaster on Channel 2. Anyway, and she quit because they didn't pay her. She found out they weren't paying her as much as they were paying her male partner. But anyway, this was a long time before that. So I was waiting for her to come and put her head in my lap. And I was waiting, and I was waiting. It was pitch dark, and I'm waiting. And all of a sudden, you hear this gasp and this thud. She had walked off the edge of the stage into the orchestra pit. And I knew, I was over the edge of my stage part, leaning down, going, Elaine, Elaine. And the poor lighting guy didn't know what the hell to do because we weren't giving him his cues. So he just put the spotlight up on us. And I was leaning over like this, and Elaine was in these Japanese robes, going floundering around. I was trying to help her up. When we got the spotlight on us, we just kind of looked out at the audience like, oh my God. There was no way we were going to do that scene without laugh. And we just broke every line. Every line we said, because she said, one of her lines was, "I think I must have fainted." And the audience just was crazy. We laughed through the whole scene, which was supposed to be really serious, but I will never, ever forget that. Never. So funny. And she
Well,
didn't,
that's what makes live theater
yeah,
live theater. I mean, and you had to react, you know?
yeah, yeah. And I mean, we just chose to go on with the scene, but unfortunately, the lines fit, and the audience just could not stand it. They were just hysterical, and so were we. We both tried to stop laughing and be serious, but you know how that is. One of us would be serious, and the other one would giggle, then the serious one would start laughing. I mean, we just couldn't stop. Couldn't stop. One of those things. So, yeah, that was a serious role that I played. Oh, and I played Mrs. Peachum in Mac the Knife.
Three
That was,
penny opera.
yes. She was the mother of the ingenue who was so innocent and sweet because her mother and father had money and kept her cloistered. And then she got sort of involved with Mac the Knife, and Mrs. Peachum was not happy about that. It was so long ago. That was Eureka Theater. But the first show we did was The Balcony, and I played the madam of the whorehouse. And I played that very serious. I stood like this, and I talked like this, and it was like, "Welcome to the House of Illusions," you know, that kind of thing. It was too much, too much. But apparently the director thought it was okay, so I kept doing it. Welcome to the House of Illusions. You can do this, and you can do that, and here, come here, and go there.
You decided to return to Columbina.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like comedy better than I think I overplay serious stuff. I try not to, but I do it because Columbina is the bottom of the ladder. Pantalone and Dottore are at the top, and then in between are the other guys, you know. And I'm at the bottom because I'm a girl and I don't know how to read, but I want to read. But the thing is, I'm the smartest character in the commedia. I mean, I solve everything. I do every, you know, I think up all the things that are supposed to happen to help Isabella get together with Leandro and stuff like that. So,
Let me
yeah.
try another counterfactual. How do you think, say, your son Bobby would have been like if he had never been in fair or been in Commedia?
Um, he would not have been well rounded. He would have been just, he would have been boring. It would have been just science, 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 which is great because we need scientists, but that would have been it. But we took him to theater from the time he was little. We took him to shows, just like my parents did to me. And so he knows a lot about theater and he loves theater. He loves seeing it on stage. We took him to musical jams and stuff. And so he's playing and he's interested in all kinds of music. We talk about music and what we like. He has his favorites and he's very interesting with his music. He's well rounded. He went away to a doctorate program. He was in the lab. He was doing what he said he wanted to do, but the people were all just one note. They were doing their science and that was it, and they weren't interested in anything else, which Robert was interested in all kinds of things. We took him on hikes. He loves to hike. That's what he does all the time. He loves nature. He loves everything. So he's very well rounded, and he couldn't stand being around people that didn't share the same ideals that he did. Anyway, he spent um, one semester at this university and then came home and never went back. And so basically, he turned into a many faceted adult um, because he had experience with. We also would take him to adult parties where all of our friends were magicians and actors and musicians, and he was never afraid. He enjoyed talking to adults, which is something that I never got into as a kid because uh, they weren't somebody they just weren't any fun. These people were fun. Talk about a lot of things, you know, with our kids, and our kids really enjoyed them. So which made us feel good because that was our life. I mean, that's how we lived. My mother disapproved, but I didn't approve of her way of socializing either. So
One of the theories I have throughout this podcast interviewing is that one of the advantages of having kids at fair is that they get to see their parents play and they get to see their parents in a different way than go clean your room.
yeah,
This is your
and stuff. Yeah, yeah, it was very good for them, for both of them. Of course, Tommy already had a start on that stuff, but Robert would have been a professor type, you know, very staid, boring, no knowledge about anything except his basic interest, which was science. That's all he was
Mhm.
interested in, science, science. But eventually, when he found out what acting was and what music was and all that, it's something he was interested in, he found out. So I think we did very well by him, by exposing him to all this craziness. And we did expose him to craziness, but he learned to love it. He loved it. He still loves it. Craziness. Like, are we school famous?
I've kind of run out of things to say. When you kindly agreed to be interviewed, was there a story or somebody you wanted to thank where you said to yourself, I must be sure to mention fill in the blank that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I want to go back to John Acorn because he is a wonderful actor, wonderful teacher. I just want to thank him for teaching me stuff about Commedia dell'arte. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot about improvisation. It's like one day Diana Perry was playing Columbina. I was playing some kind of queen or something. At the very beginning of our show, where we did a lot of physical stuff to introduce ourselves, she threw her back out. So she was out of the show. So it was a really good experience for me because I had to take on her bits. Like she had a fish she was doing something with. I had to take on the fish bit. And it got very boring for me when I went back to just being me. You know, I just had a great time doing that. I never thought I would at the last minute, if I were told to play somebody else's role as well as mine. And that happened once again. We were doing a commedia, but I was playing the dwarf. We went to a prison to perform for them, and we walked through the door. They went through all our stuff. They went through our ingenue's purse and found a joint. And they arrested her, read her rights, then put her out on the road to catch a bus back to San Francisco. My director walks up to me and goes, "Well, trooper." So I'm going, how do I do this? I'm dressed in like a clown suit, basically, with a big ruff around my neck and a silly hat and all this stuff. And so, and then I didn't know her lines. And this was a play that, you had to say the right lines because it was a classical. Moscow was one of the characters. So I had this pink satin cape that she had worn. So I kind of had to explain in character, in my dwarf character, I explained to the prisoners, well, I'm going to try to play the ingenue, the beautiful ingenue, so and so. And so every time I had to do her scenes, I'd throw the cape on and I'd bring out the script. They didn't care. They enjoyed it. So, but that was something that was not fun for me. I did not enjoy doing it because we had to stick to the script. And I had not memorized her lines. She had a lot of lines. And it was all classical. The show went on, and I was the only woman in the show, so I was the ingenue and the dwarf. It was very interesting. I ended up playing that same role at South Coast Rep too. Volpone. Volpone was the play. Volpone, yeah. Anyway, yeah, it was Volpone. So it had to be. It's like doing Shakespeare. You don't want to. You can't really make unless you're doing a commedia, like how I taught the kids. I just use a Shakespeare play as a scenario and have the same characters, and then they would just improvise. But this was supposed to. This director didn't know what he was doing, to tell you the truth. But he wanted it to be like a commedia, and it wasn't really a commedia. It was weird, and we had to say the exact lines. But the prisoners loved it. Yeah, they were given the chance during that time. They had had a lockdown, so some of the people we were supposed to perform for, we didn't get to. But the prisoners had a break where they were allowed to go play basketball. So they were given the choice to either go play basketball or watch Volpone. They all came in and watched Volpone, and they didn't walk out, and that was really great. It was
One
cool.
thing you learn at fair is that audiences can walk away
Yes,
very easily.
very. That's true. There's a lot of noise, a lot of other distractions, and a lot of people drinking a lot of ale in the hot sun. But the only time we ever uh, picked on a person who was disturbing the audience by walking out or whatever, it was some fair actor who was doing something totally inappropriate. He, in the middle of our show, he stood up and he said, "Blasphemy, blasphemy." It was like the whole show was about him. We didn't even know who he was, and he's screaming at the audience, and he's going, and it just. And then I guess the Celts came and kidnapped our. We had to have a interpreter, And once they came and kidnapped, they all came on stage and kidnapped the interpreter, and we just went on with the show. I mean, what can you do? I got really mad at this guy that was screaming and yelling. I mean, when people get up and walk to do something else, they're not screaming and yelling. They may go talk to a friend or something, but they're not disturbing the performance on purpose. They just get up and they leave, and that's it. So that's no problem for us. And usually people stay for our shows. It's absolutely understandable if they don't want to sit there and watch, for a half an hour and watch the show. So it's not something, unless the whole audience got up and left, then we would be upset. That would not be something we'd want to experience. But that never happened. Thank God.
I this is where I shyly raise my hand and say I was in some shows where, yeah, that's happened to me, and that's
Yes.
a that's a long 6 weeks. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, plus main stage was hard because you pretty much had to cover the entire stage to keep people's interest, both levels and on the ship and up on the balcony. You had to have something going on everywhere. So so we did one of our shows and that's what we did. We just had things going on all over the stage. We were a little concerned, but not too concerned because we knew what we were doing. So we had things. We walked through the audience making all this noise and kidnapping people to come help us carry all these barrels and crates and stuff up to the ship, and then we'd kick them off stage. And things were going on the ship, and we had a storm scene with demons who were, storm demons who were throwing streamers at the ship, and just it was pretty wild. It was pretty wild. It was, again, this was based on loosely on the Tempest. This show.
Yeah, Mark and I learned a lot watching your shows and going, oh, that's how you can do that. And
Yes.
then going, oh, we could do that. The progression to that you should be able to tell the story at a glance if you're 120 feet away, kind of thing. That's a thank you, I guess.
You're welcome. To hear that. I'm happy to hear that. That means we're doing something right.
Well, one of the things I do like about fair is that there is a continuity to it. And if you go to a fair now, you're still going to have bosomy young lady with a dead fish in her hand saying, want to buy a fish or something like that.
Yes. And you have to be careful. It's fine to do something that somebody else has done, but you have to take into account what the variables are. Like we made up a bit. I made it up because I'm small. We had Leandro and Isabella were very tall actors, and they had just seen each other and they were coming to each other to do something. So I stepped in between them and I played the traffic cop. I had a whistle. I had white gloves. I went, stop, Isabella. Stop, Leandro. And they'd come and then stop them and then and I'd stop them. And eventually they couldn't stop. They just came together and sandwiched me in between them. And you could not see me at all. And I had to, and like, I came out, one leg out and shoulder, because they were kissing and hugging and doing this and trying to get up. And that was funny. And apparently, some other show, it wasn't at the fair. I don't know who these people were, but Jim saw a video of it. They took the joke that we had made up and they did it, but they didn't have the tall people and they didn't have the short person. It really requires that person in the middle being overcome by these two tall people, and it's not going to work with somebody who's a normal size. Really, it's not going to work as well. So you have to realize those things. If you're going to take something and do it, you have to have the specific, or it's not going, it'll be sad. It's not going to work.
Well, that's somebody imitating the form without really understanding what they're going for.
And it was hysterical. And what was hysterical was me, the little person with a whistle in my mouth and the white gloves going, stop, then like this. Stop, then like this to that person, and playing the traffic cop. and really playing it with the whistle and everything. And then, yeah, they just get out of control and they speed up and they run over me. And that was one scene we were really proud of that. It was very funny. I think we put it in something else too. That's another thing. When you develop something like that and it's funny and it works, you you can just keep it and put it in other shows because that's how the Lotsie work. Any character, and this is what I taught the kids, any character can play fine in any Lotso. It doesn't matter. You know, if you first saw the Lotso being done with Pantalone and Arlecchino, and it was funny, but you can take the whole thing and put Isabella and Columbina there doing this Lotso, you know, whatever it is. And it changes, but it's the same thing. And it's very funny. I mean, I think the old commedia companies used to do, they had a whole list of acts, of scenes, of little happenings, you know, Lotsie that you'd see a space in your show where that would really work. So you put it in there. And basically, I mean, you could almost make up, in fact, I did that with the kids once, made up a whole show with using just Lotsie that they had learned. And we just made a whole scenario that just engulfed it all. And these jokes are pretty much very old. They're either very old or they're from our friend's circus experience. Clown. He taught us some really fun. Boy, it's making me want to go out and do some acting, some commedia. I'm sorry the fairs aren't really happening anymore. I mean, I know they are, but and now I've got a shop. Now I'm a boothie at the Dickens Fair, so I can't go do a play or anything like that. Yeah, I really have fond memories of all that.
So you sell your
Yeah,
headdresses?
yes, yeah.
Just in case somebody listening ends up at Dickens Fair, what's the name of your booth?
It's called Salon des Artistes. It was near Mad Sal's, but I don't know if they're going to put us in the same place, but they probably will. But it's Salon des Artistes, and it's two shops. It's Jules by Olivia and Ozma's Mirror. So it's all three of those things. But the big letters say Salon des Artistes. And unfortunately, my partner had the sign made and she didn't put the S on the end of artistes. And I had studied French. I'm going, wait a minute. You didn't put the S, there has to be an S there. And she, oh, it's okay. She just left it. And we have a woman from France was helping us in the shop. And she's a really good friend of my partner's. But anyway, she's going, we can't be here when people come in from France. It's so embarrassing because you know, with the signs. Anyway, we were supposed to all be from France, and that was my adding a little theater to the whole thing, but it never really merged because we were kind of embarrassed about the sign. And this year I said, okay, Olivia, we're putting an S at the end of our T's. We're putting an S. It's okay. Nobody's going to. And so the French woman and I are going to have to join forces. And if worse comes to worse, we'll put Jim on a ladder and he'll have to paint an S there.
Before I ask my traditional last question, now that and the theme of the sort of podcast is fear and your life, is there any story or closing remarks you'd like to make?
Oh, wow. Well, for one thing, I think the fair is a family. And I mean, I met my husband there, and all the fair people came to our wedding, you know, and Phyllis was teasing us because it was the year that we couldn't do a Dickens fair. And she said, so Marilyn and Jim decided to have a wedding to fill in for not having the Dickens fair. And we had the brass band there and all these people. And it was musicians playing our processional and recessional and just so she was joking around telling everybody that and but it really was a family, especially the Renaissance fair. I think we saw babies being born, people dying, new people coming, you know, just new families, new relationships, and then relationships breaking up. And it was really a village. It was, and I felt like I was accepted there, which when I was down in LA at South Coast Rep, I would walk along and people would look at me like, you know, and because I'm small and I'm dark and I had curly hair, and I don't know what they thought. I think they thought I was Hispanic. I don't know what they thought, but they were rude. I mean, I walked by a group of guys that just laughed, were laughing and laughing and laughing. I turned around and I said, fuck off. It just made them laugh more. So I remember the San Francisco Mime Troupe came down there to do a show, and I went and saw it, and I thought, I feel like I'm living on another planet right now because this isn't what I'm used to. And the fair is opens its arms and kind of embraces you for who you are. And I think that's really, really nice. In some cases, it's not so good, but for the most part, feeling like it's a family in a village. It was really a village at Northern Fair, Southern Fair too. I loved Southern Fair. Yeah, and I had a lot of things go on during my tenure at the fair. I mean, did it for years and years, and at one point I was traveling up and down California doing all the fairs, Dickens and both the Renaissance fairs and commercials about the fair and all this stuff, and working in the offices and doing everything. And so it was a big part of my life. And I can't remember the point I was going to make with that, but I think maybe it made itself. I don't know. I had boyfriends and I lost the boyfriends, and I had broken hearts, had people trying to help me with my broken heart while I'm performing. And just, it was like comedy. It was like a commedia. You have all these things going on while you're performing at the fair, going on in your real life, but it's at the fair. So it's very fair like, it's very commedia-esque, and you have friends who are going to help you through whatever situation you're in. So yeah, I love the fair. It was a good part of my life. Uh, the people that were in my first show at Southern Fair became lifelong friends, and that was before I even met my husband. I mean, this was over 40 years ago, and they're still friends. The other woman in the show was my bridesmaid. We go down south and visit these people a lot. They come up here and visit us, and they're I really value these people that I've met and worked with at the fair, and it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't decided to perform there. So I really treasure these friendships.
I think this is a good time to stop recording.
Yeah.
So thank you, Marilyn Letchworth. This has been another episode of Fair Folk at Work. My guest has been Marilyn Letchworth. Questions or comments can be directed to me, djng@earthlink.net. If you or your friends would like to participate in Fair Folk at Work, give me an email at djng@earthlink.net. But that's it for this time. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.